doing the meetings, and when you got pets in the house. So Angela mentioned, one of the other things that's happened right now with the COVID-19, the virus, just the state of where we're at over the past couple months is about the time that all of this came out in March. One of the most Googled searches was how to write my own will or how to plan my estate. And when you have times of uncertainty, when you have things like what, unfortunately families are being hit with that are experiencing loss with the COVID-19 or just other things, even in general, estate planning and what we're going to talk about today is, it's not always the most pleasant topic, but it's an important one. And as you see on the next slide, one of the quotes that Eddie Thompson, who started this company 25 years ago, shared, this is a quote that we've used time and time again. And I'll tell you a little bit more about our firm and kind of what we do, what we don't do. But the tone of this today is to be educational. The tone is also to be interactive. So if you got questions, feel free to ask. But this quote kind of gets at the heart of what we try to do, that if you think about your estate plan as the single greatest financial impact you can have on your family and the largest financial transfer that you'll ever control, planning for this transfer can be profoundly liberating and positive when it breathes life and possibility into the future. And so estate planning is not necessarily about doing something for you, it's about for those you leave behind. And some of you may have had parents, grandparents that you've experienced this type of planning. And what we try to do is, on the next slide here, is just talk through this idea that the way our tax system works is there are really only three places an estate can go. It can go to your heirs, kids, grandkids, or anybody that you might, want to leave an individual. It can go to the government, or it can go to charity. And so, as Angela mentioned, we're an estate planning firm. We're based out of Nashville. I actually grew up in Franklin, Indiana, not too far from Shelbyville. Been down in Louisville since 2001, and I'm a certified financial planner by background. I've done a lot of work in this area, and our firm does about 1,500 estate plans a year. So we have seen a lot, and hopefully the value we bring to the planning process is to help people think through how to direct their dollars. And sometimes we refer to it as involuntary philanthropy, meaning taxes, or voluntary philanthropy, where you can direct dollars to local charities. The catch, if there's anything, when we talk about this planning process that the foundation has retained us to make available to friends like you, is that if after taking care of your family and taking care of your grandkids, if there's money left over that is going to either go to the Uncle Sam or possibly to charity, if we can show strategies that are hopefully simple and straightforward and direct those dollars to local charities, maybe the hospital foundation being one of them, your church, your alma mater, the community foundation, for most people that's a win. And for most people it's often overlooked as far as a planning strategy. So when we think about estate planning, we tend to frame it in these three buckets, and then we'll dive into a few things as we go along here. So as Angela mentioned, our roadmap for today, how do I know if I need to update my current estate plan? We'll talk about some current tax law changes, how to avoid some unnecessary and often overlooked taxes. How can you, I use the phrase a lot, connect your values to your valuables? How can you pass on more than just assets? And we're going to talk about how we have some tools that help people think through that in the planning process. And ultimately, can we leave money otherwise going to the government, to a local charity? So you don't have to answer this, although I guess we have a chat feature, but you don't feel obligated to answer. But true or false, this question comes up a lot when we do estate planning. If I have a will, my estate avoids probate. So maybe just think about that, and we'll tell you the answer here. And the answer is false. And so if you have a will, that actually is in our analogy here, a ticket to the probate court. And probate doesn't have to be a bad word in estate planning. If you look at the next slide here, you'll see that probate is really just taking someone's name off of it, someone that's passed away, their legal title, and changing it to their heirs. So in this case, John Jones Sr. to John Jones Jr. When you die and open up an estate, and if things go through the probate process, it's opened up at the court, and creditors are given a time period based on different state laws to make claims against the estate. And so the things from an estate planning perspective that a lot of times beneficiaries, and again, estate planning is not necessarily about you, it's about who you leave behind. So this idea of for your beneficiaries to have a simple, straightforward, fast, easy, least tax as possible estate plan is typically the goal. And probate can extend things. It can be a little timely. There are some costs involved, but it doesn't have to be the end of the world as far as a planning perspective. And you'll see that kind of on the next slide is what I was kind of getting at, that, it could be tied up 9 to 18 months, and, costs can be anywhere from 2 to 3 to 4% of an estate value. So it doesn't sound like a lot, but when you do that percentage on a total net worth, that can be some real dollars. So are there planning strategies that can minimize this? And that does lead us into a discussion that we start with a lot of people in the beginning, is just, what are you worth? How much, from a balance sheet perspective, what do you own? And just understanding how large your estate really is. And then taking into account the fact that it'll probably grow over time. And we help people think through, those types on the next slide of the property that they own, their businesses, investment interest, IRAs, stock, bond accounts, closely held stock. You've got expensive collections, life insurance, the full value of the death benefit of life insurance policy, if not properly structured and owned properly, can be included in your taxable estate. So you might think you have this slide here. What the IRS might view you to have, or the county assessor here, is something a little nicer. And then we kind of joke what the IRS's job is to think you own the Taj Mahal, and that you I don't know if that's Atlantis or the Taj Mahal. That's a nice Peruvian resort, it looks like. That their job is to go out and grab all the assets that you might own, put the highest value on it, and tax them. And so a big part of estate planning is this difference between controlling assets and owning assets. And anything that we talk about, it's within the letter of the law. It's conservative planning. I use the analogy that we try to keep, when we do estate planning with couples and individuals, to keep them close to the trunk of the tree. We don't want to get too far out on a limb. So, but this is the give and take, and this is just, it takes planning. And what we'll hopefully show you today is that a little bit of planning that really doesn't cost a lot and is not super complicated can save some big dollars when you're talking about estate planning. So for most people that we meet with, they are in, accumulating assets, building an estate. And I mentioned, as a firm, Thompson Associates, we do not manage investments. We don't sell insurance. We don't do retirement cash flow modeling or financial planning. That's for financial advisors, insurance advisors. So what we do is kind of what we're going to show you here is play God a little bit and assume that if you're married, husband and wife die today, and how does the IRS look at everything that you have on your balance sheet? And so the idea of improving your standard of living, maintaining a retirement, insurance planning, providing in the case of just a life event, a health event, a major health event, a disability, a premature death. If some of you have possibly even experienced that in your own families, know what that can bring to just as a lot of complexity, a lot of heartache, and with a little bit of planning, some of this can be minimized, and then ultimately transferring assets to families and other beneficiaries. So we do think of this, this house analogy. We've shown you several houses, but the basic estate planning is really trying to get that foundational level of having your living, your will, your living will, powers of attorney, for healthcare, for business, for financial. That would be what we would consider to be a basic estate planning package. And then you can get into other areas like trusts and advanced planning strategies, like charitable trust and different types of vehicles, revocable living trust, if you've heard that term. And we can talk about some of that. But for a lot of people, just the blocking and tackling of the basic estate planning documents can have a huge impact on their planning. And then one that's not on here, but it's often overlooked, is anything that you fill out by beneficiary designation, and we're going to talk about that on this next slide, is that we want people to understand that I think it's often not understood that you really have two estates. You've got property that passes by a beneficiary designation, life insurance. If you've ever applied for life insurance, you have to fill out a beneficiary form. Jointly owned property, you've got two names or maybe multiple names on that. A revocable trust will have beneficiaries named. Retirement accounts, IRAs, 403Bs, 401Ks, annuities, anything where you have a beneficiary form, those pass outside of that probate estate and pass directly to your beneficiaries. Things in the probate estate like your home, real property, a stock and bond account, a business, personal possessions, those are the assets that typically go through that probate process that we talked about earlier. So one of the things that we like to think about in the estate planning process, and on the next slide, is how to leave assets. And as I mentioned, we do on average 1,500 plans a year. This is just an internal, very informal summary, but we've been doing this for a long time. And over time, we're seeing a little bit of a shift. And that's what I want to share with you here on this slide. Historically, if you think about your parents, your grandparents, previous generations typically left assets outright to their heirs. And there's nothing really wrong with that. But what we're seeing more and more of in today's planning is this idea that a couple themes. One is asset protection. Now, 1 out of every 2 marriages, ends in divorce. So it's a coin flip, unfortunately. But that poses some financial and estate planning issues, especially if you have a sizable estate and let's say your daughter's married to a boy that you're less than happy about. You think it's kind of rocky. You don't know how it's going to end. Well, leaving assets outright to your daughter, if something were to happen to you in this example, and then they get divorced, now half of everything that you left to her and have worked so hard to accomplish could go to an ex-son-in-law that you might not have been happy about in the first place. So asset protection, keeping things in the family, one example. We're seeing more and more special needs trust, children, grandchildren with disabilities where they're receiving some kind of government benefit, and leaving money outright to those types of beneficiaries can be the worst thing because that can kick them out of the government benefit program. So especially
Looks like we've lost Brian. I hope just for a minute. Can you hear me, Brian? Shoot. I think he's going to call back in. We've lost him.